Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Embers of Rebellion. Episode 13. Even though her toy collection takes up half our house, he chuckles. Well, Zoe locked her in the basement. So now she has no choice but to hear her out. Ava says. He nods his head and turns to the driver's door. And Tatum. I call, and he stops looking at me. Every person she has dated walked the same day she told them. She held off only twice, hoping they would stay once they knew her, but they also walked. The only reason she didn't tell you is that she was worried about losing you. I know that. But I wasn't going anywhere, he answers. But you. She didn't know that is why you left. Before you, she tried dating, and all of them walked out halfway through the first date, I tell him, and Tatum frowns. He nods his head before climbing into the car. I go back to mine and climb into the driver's seat, and Ava climbs in the back with Mum. I had Ava text Callan on the drive home. He would be half an hour. We were just down the end of the street from home when static went over the radio. I flicked the station over to find them all the same when the traffic lights suddenly went out up ahead. I peered up at the sky, wondering if a storm was brewing, yet the overcast day was the same. The sky hadn't darkened more. I glanced at Ava, whose face was scrunched up as she peered at her phone. She was playing some game on it. I have no cell service, she says, and I reach over and pass my phone to her, and she unlocks it. Neither do you, she says just as the tornado sirens blare. However, the sirens weren't used for tornado warnings. No, we never got tornadoes here, and I hadn't heard that noise since I was a kid. My eyes widen, and I peer at Tatum's car behind me when Lucian's voice and my father's booms through the mind link. All warriors to the borders. Everyone else, get inside and lock your door. I swallowed, and my mother was blissfully unaware as she spoke to herself. She looked at me and smiled. What's that noise? She asked. Neither of us answers her, and I glance at Ava. She stared back and looked petrified when Lucian mind-linked me. Get home and lock the doors. How many? And where? I ask, opening the link to Dante, Zoe, and Tatum to join. Get home and lock the door, Marin. Lucian snaps. Lucian, how many? I snarled. He doesn't answer and I could feel his fear through the bond. Hundreds, he says. The girls. Zoe screeches through the link. I have them in Valerian. I'm behind Marin now, Tatum chimes in as we pull into the hotel car park. The shutters were rolling down on the lower level windows and securing the doors. I roll my window down, waving Tatum toward the underground car park, and he gives me a thumbs up. Zoe, get to the basement. I will get to Casey. Dante orders her, and she whimpers before being shoved out of the link. Where are they coming in? Tatum asks. Everywhere. Dante and Lucian said before the mind link turned to chaos and I nearly ran into a pillar before I forced everyone out. We pull up and start ripping the kids from the cars, and my mother shoves them toward the elevators, finally coming back to her senses. Is that? She asks, looking at Ava, who nods to her. Valerian hits the elevator button, but the doors don't open. The emergency generators didn't operate them, leaving the stairs. The roller shutters start dropping as we rush the kids to the fire exit. The bells sound as I rip the door open, and we usher the kids inside when snarling growls echo through the underground car park. Tatum pivots just as a heap rush inside the parking garage. He rips his shirt off and growls, and they pause observing their threat before he looks at me over his shoulder. "Get inside, Luna," my heart raced as I stared at the Forsaken stalking into the place. "Tatum!" I called out. Tatum's eyes were on the Forsaken, and he was too focused on them circling him. "Inside, Luna! Now!" he roared before shifting as they ran at him. My eyes widened, and I rushed through the door, slamming it shut and locking it. Turning around, I see the kid's frightened face peering back at me. "Tatum!" Taylor says, her eyes on the door where vicious growls and banging came from. "He's okay. He will be okay," I tell Taylor while turning her and pushing her up the stairs. Ava stares at me. I nod to her, and her eyes turn glassy, but she nods once, pushing Mum up the stairs. We were locked in the stairwell, all the doors locked as we climbed the levels. "Lucian, we can't get inside." I called through the link. I got no answer, meaning he was blocking me out of whatever was happening outside. We were halfway up the stairwell when we heard the banging on the door below. "Tatum!" Taylor squeals, rushing back down, and I just grabbed her before she got past me when I heard the door burst open below. Ava looks over the side, and the blood drains from her face, and I glance over to see Forsaken rushing up the steps. "Run!" I screamed. Ava grabs Valerian and Mum. She was struggling to climb the stairs. She was exhausted, as she always was after being given the vaccine. "Get to the roof!" I screamed while grabbing Casey and Taylor. Mum rips her hand from Ava. "I'm slowing you down. Get the kids up," she growls at Ava, who looks at me. I place Taylor on the ground, and Ava's hand locks around her wrist. I grab Valerian and Ava grabs Casey too. "Valerian, like we practiced at training," I tell him. "Don't look back. Don't stop, Mum." Valerian stammers with tear-filled eyes, and his lip quivers. "Don't look back. Don't stop," I repeat, and he nods. Seeing the fear on his face made me want to hug him, but he listened and took off running up the steps while Ava ripped the girls up them. "3 more flights, Mum," I tell her. She kept trying to pull my hand from hers, but I snarled at her before commanding her. "Move faster. Now!" I ordered. I heard them get onto the roof while vicious snarls came from below, but the command worked as she was forced to move quicker. Only they were gaining ground fast, and we were one set of steps from the roof when I heard a snarl behind me. Mum freezes, and so do I. Turning slowly, I find 2 Forsaken on the steps prowling and stalking up the steps toward us when my mother's hand grips the back of my shirt. "You're gonna run for me now, baby girl," she murmurs as we both walk backward up the stairs as they stalked us. Their fur was falling out and what was left was matted, blood dripping from their muzzles as they snapped their teeth and snarled while creeping closer up the steps. I shake my head at her words. "I'm proud of you, baby. But I need you to do this for me," she says when I heard her bones start snapping just as she ripped me backward behind her, and I only just caught myself. "Tell your father and sister I love them," she says before shifting. I screamed as she started ripping into them, and they began tearing her apart. I went to take a step toward her when I looked down at my stomach. Tears burned my eyes, tearing my gaze from her and the bloodshed. I ran for safety. Chapter 115. My hands hit the door, jarring them with the force as I burst onto the roof. Ava screamed and ripped the kids behind her body, using herself as a shield, and I twisted, slamming it shut. The racket coming from the stairwell was deafening as I stared at the door where I had just abandoned my mother, pulling my gaze from the door. Ava rushed over, jamming a piece of a broken pipe she ripped off from somewhere through the handle and line that ran to the vents on the roof above the door. Yet all I could think was, I left her in there. I ran and left her behind. Ava whimpers as she secures the bar. I didn't have to tell her. She knew because Mum didn't come out behind me. Yet as she turned to look at me, I could see her heart break. My entire body shook with adrenaline and shock. I left her. I thought when a tiny hand slipped into mine. Looking down, I find Valerian looking at me. "Grandma will be okay," he says, only I knew she wouldn't be. I swallowed and blinked back tears before turning to him and picking him up. "Yep." She found another open door, I tell him while walking over to the girls. I placed him beside the girls, where they were huddled on the ground by the air conditioner vent. Ava moves to the ledge of the building, and I follow her, checking over my shoulder to make sure the kids don't follow. She looks over, and so do I, and the city was in utter chaos and ruins. Buildings in the distance were on fire, screams rang out loudly, and a frenzied battle could be seen from here on the main street. Warriors were trying to hold the Forsaken back from the borders. Lucian was right. There were hundreds of them. They just kept coming. The street directly below us was a scene from a H0RR0R movie as our men tried to keep them back. 2 Forsaken were dragging another wolf off, and I didn't want to think what they were doing to him as they yelped loudly. "Her tether?" Ava asked me, and I swallowed. "Not broken yet." "She is fighting," I whispered, staring out blankly. I noticed from up here that not one of those Forsaken were trying to get into Nixon's pack directly across from us. They were targeting ours, the Slasher pack. How was the city outnumbered? Ava gasps when an explosion goes off down by the cafe on the main street. Carnage. There was no other way to describe it, and the pack warriors were outnumbered. Slasher's pack's men were trying to stop them from getting in, but a few slipped through, and just like our men, they couldn't hold them back, they just kept coming. It should be impossible that so many could go unnoticed, but when one of the skyrise apartments across from us caught on fire, more screams rang out from the apartment building as Forsaken got inside, and I just hoped the roller shutters and the locked stairway door held. The mind link opens up, and I hear Zoe. "Is Casey all right?" "We are on the roof," I answered while peering over my shoulder to look at the children, and she sighed before she sobbed through the link. "And Dante? Is he there yet?" "I am being blocked out." "I can't get a hold of anyone," she asked, but I couldn't lie to her either. "Not yet, but…" "Zoe, the city, I don't finish." The place looked like a battlefield. "As long as Casey is safe," she says. "Are you safe?" I ask her. "I'm in the basement with some of the younger workers." "But Macy, she…" "Macy, what?" "Zoe?" I asked, panicked. "She heard the sirens when I opened the doors and bolted out. We tried to stop her," Zoe says. "She has no phone. We have no service in here, and she has no pack link," I finish for her. My heart was beating faster at her words. "We think she went to warn the rogues at the reserves and homeless shelter. This side hasn't been hit yet," Zoe tells me. "Yes, because they were all over here trying to access our pack and slashers, while Nixon's remained untouched. That wasn't a coincidence." The mind link is stretched when I feel Lucian force it open, and Zoe is shoved out. "We are trying to get to you. You just need to hold tight a little longer," he said, though pain radiated through the bond, and I knew he was hurt. "What about Dante?" "Zoe is trying to get a hold of him." "No idea. Everyone is blocking the pack link so we don't become distracted. The mind link cuts off abruptly only for Zoe to reopen it, having felt the connection from Lucian override hers. Dante? They lost sight of each other. Dante is fine, Zoe. Lucian would have felt the tether break, I tell her, though I had no idea if that would remain true. I felt helpless as I watched our pack getting S*D on the streets below while I was holed up on a roof, unable to help them. Tatum teeth, claws, blood, and fur. Everything was a blur as I tried to hold them back. I was screaming through the link for Lucian to get here when a few slipped past me. Men called through the link that they were on the way. Yet as one fell, another replaced it. They seemed to just keep coming, and I was taking a beating. The venom in my system was starting to make my muscles ache and lock. The only thing keeping me on my feet was adrenaline and knowing that Taylor, Valerian, and Casey were in that stairwell. I just hoped they got inside the building and weren't sitting ducks. My back leg is ripped into simultaneously as two attacked, snarling. I pivot and twist, nearly ripping my leg off in the process. Yelps and snarling ripped from the stairwell, causing me to become distracted as I tried to double back only to be jumped on. His claws ripped through my fur, making my back arch, and his teeth were like a serrated knife as they tore into the back of my neck. The stairwell, I kept thinking, while trying to toss him off as more flooded into the stairs, escaping past me while I was being ripped to shreds. My teeth sank into its front paw, and I felt the crunch as its bones broke under the pressure of my jaw, forcing him to release me long enough to fling him off. I turned, running for the stairwell, my vision blurring as I ran when Forsaken were suddenly running back out of the stairwell. My heart jolted seeing the rabid creatures running when one dropped as a huge, molten-colored wolf tore into its neck. And it took me a second to realize it was Claire. Yet she didn't look like a pack wolf but one of the Forsaken. Her blood-red eyes were savage, and venom was oozing and dripping from her teeth. Panic coursed through me, knowing if she turned on me, I would have to kill Marin's mother when her head twisted in my direction. Her lips pull back as she drops her head, snarling and stalking towards me before she runs at me. I snarled back when she lunged, only she missed, and I jumped aside, skidding on the slick-kenned, blood-soaked floor, only to see her rip into a Forsaken that must have been coming up behind me. Four more rush through the barrier and I jump over her, jumping into the fray. She was a full-blown Forsaken. However, she was fighting our side, not theirs, which gave her an advantage, as they kept recognizing her as their own. With the savage gleam and the way she fought, you could tell John trained her himself. She was just as lethal, but with a vicious edge. She tore into them, locking her jaw each time and tearing them to shreds, not even flinching as they tore into her back. Relentlessly, she fought, saving me twice and I hers as we fought tail to tail, trying to hold them back. My back leg was useless, and I was running on 3, the other hanging behind me. "We're in the street," Lucian called, and I couldn't reply. I was too focused on the wolves in front of me. We needed to try to push them back to the street. Claire was taking on 3, but even she was on the losing end this time as I ripped one off her that was ripping into her flank, her jaws locked around another one's neck. My paw swipes at the other, and we push them back and keep pushing them back up the ramp. Daylight broke as we kept forcing them further back when she let out a whimper as we made it out the front of the hotel. Pivoting, I ran towards her when a deafening howl ripped through the air as she swayed on her feet. Her throat is torn out, and her front legs buckle when a giant black and grey wolf starts ripping them off her, and another Forsaken tackles me. I break the wolf's neck and turn my head to find it was John. The 3 dead, Forsaken lying around him, and John now stood en number ked petting her wolf. Her chest rises and she wheezes as blood pools around her when her chest appears to deflate. And the agonized howl that turned to a wail shook me to the core when I heard Marin's wailing scream ring out above as she felt her mother's link disintegrate. Everyone stops at the noise, even the Forsaken who are flooding into the street. Lucian's wolf was huge and the one beside him equally big, and I recognized the wolf as the Slasher Pack's alpha. When Dante's grey wolf rushed past me toward the Forsaken, his coat tainted red, and the chaos started again. John's angered roar made my fur stand on end, and he shifted. He erupted and barreled towards the Forsaken with blind fury, ripping them apart as the bloodshed started again. Yet as an observer, I realized something. They were heading here, and they were running for the Alpha's homes, making this targeted and well thought out. From what I heard, the Rogues side and Marin's hotel side of the city remained untouched by the information coming through the link. The carnage only happening on one side. Nixon had to be behind it. And he was casting the Rogues as the ones starting it. Chaos ensued as we battled, our men falling and the Forsaken kept coming. Lucian and the Slasher Pack Alpha, even John and Callan, were lethal beasts. The four Alphas working together as they got right in the middle of the battle, huge towering beasts compared to the Forsaken. Not a speck of fur was left untainted, their coats dripping in blood, both theirs and the Forsaken. This is what made them Alphas, pure lethal muscle and precision like no other. Despite their massive sizes, they were fast and ran through them like a bowling ball knocking down pins. The street's gutters ran like rivers with blood, and it stained everything. They didn't stop, but neither did the Forsaken. These numbers should not exist. How could they outnumber us? 3 packs were fighting, and we were still somehow outnumbered, or so we thought until the snarls shook windows. The deafening force of pure rage reverberated around the street, everyone stopping to stare down the end of the road looking for the source of the rumbling noise when Macy appeared. My heart stopped as she ran from down the street straight at us with a huge bat in her hands. Fear coursed through me, and I ran towards her as the Forsaken took off in her direction. Only to start skidding across the ground as they tried to stop and double back when the Rogues tore up the street towards us. I stopped as she led her army of Rogues to the battle, and they were a sight to be seen. Our men were given rest as they jumped into battle without hesitation. Saving those who shunned them, cast them out, and fought as one. Pack members and Rogues were fighting alongside each other and painting the street red with the blood of the Forsaken and proving their innocence and their own desperate need to fight for our city. Teeth sank into my neck, and I was flung across the road. My head smashed into the gutter, and I could hear screaming in the distance before I felt air blow the fur across my face as her bat connected with the wolf's skull with a thud. My eyes blurred as I opened them to see her bashing its skull into the earth with brute force. Her clothes were stained with blood, her arm bleeding from where she had been bitten. But even covered in blood, she was beautiful as she fought. And I caught sight of Zoe's small white wolf protecting Dante, who was trying to protect her when Macy screamed. My heart thumped and felt like it left my body as I tried to get to my feet, staggering as the venom took hold. Only it wasn't a scream of pain but a war cry as she flung her bat at the wolf, ripping into Alpha John. She grunts when she is tackled from behind, only for Callan to rip the wolf off her. I was delirious as I tried to find my footing and get to her, and I felt my surroundings flip and turn on their axis before I succumbed to the nothingness. Chapter 116. Marin, there are no winners in a war. Either way, somebody loses, and even the winners lose. They lose friends, family, humanity, and themselves. We won the battle, but no one wins the war because no one walks away unscathed after witnessing such carnage, such loss, and it always ends in grief. Grief shows you how valuable life is but also how cruel life is. It shows you the darkness of losing someone. Then it shows you the light in appreciating others more. You realize how precious life is but also how short life can be. You learn how torturous it can be when you lose someone you couldn't imagine living without, but somehow you do. Somehow, you're still breathing even when the pain of grief is so intense you believe it will kill you and sometimes wish it would, just so you don't have to know the pain of losing them. Standing in this hall with hundreds of peering faces staring back at us, you could see their grief as if they wore it like armor, as if it was branded into their very being like a tattoo, screaming their anguish. You could hear their gut-wrenching screams as they realized the pain they were feeling wasn't hurt loved ones but broken bonds, and broken families, broken. Nothing will kill your soul more than losing a loved one. Nothing will break you down more than realizing you will never hold them again, never hear their voices, never see them. We stood on a podium while Lucian called out the names of loved ones, needing them to come forward to claim their DD sons, dead mates, and DD parents, and while trying to mask my own grief, I witnessed theirs, felt theirs with each broken tether. How Lucian called out the names, it was almost as if he was desensitized to death, expressionless. Yet, through the bond, I knew he was barely holding it together as their screams and pain rippled through him like a stone tossed in the lake, that rippling tide on repeat, and I don't know how he bared it as he tried to keep the bond blocked, though those that sifted through I felt him, felt them. We won the battle, but we lost too. 176 lives were lost, 91 bonds are broken, meaning a possible 91 more lives to wither away until either they die slowly or their bond does. Most of those deaths were men. She-wolves rarely lived without their mates. Yet seeing my father sitting vacantly ahead, I knew he wished it killed him. Lucian called the names, and we heard their cries. It felt surreal, like a nightmare, a loop of H0RR0R that we were desperately trying to wake up from. When he finished, we made our way out and met up with the council investigators. They were raiding my father's house when the attack started and they quick to jump in to help. Then while we cleaned up, they raided Nixon's pack. A vast majority of the Forsaken turned out to be his own people, unbonded males that apparently volunteered in the name of science, put up their hands, half his pack gone, and for what? The other half was shocked, and Nixon used the attack as an escape from the city. They were left abandoned. As each Forsaken shifted back after their death, we were left with their true identities. He killed his own people. The rest were the missing rogues. They were promised money, a cure, and a pack for their sacrifice. A sacrifice that ended in their deaths. Some thought it was worth the risk. We were shocked to find that his daughter was DD. He had apparently switched off her life support before fleeing the city, leaving behind his son in a padded room, which we learned held the cure in his veins. His blood was the key needed to save them. The investigators told us that Carter was shocked by his father's plans, that he had nothing to do with it or knew anything of it. That he, too, was a victim of his own father's cruelty. A pack that was now left to him, Nixon had moved all his money and took every cent the pack had before running away like a coward, leaving behind his mate, his son, and killing Carter's sister. I thought I knew evil, but Nixon proved he was more than evil. There wasn't an accurate word to describe what he had done to this city, to his own people and his family. Carter had handed his blood samples to the Slasher pack and Lucian's pack for testing. Carter was a miracle. Nixon had accomplished something. He accomplished finding a cure for the incurable. He was planning on infecting the world and then selling the cure to them. Zoe was standing by the car with the kids and Callan. I touch Lucian's arm, and he looks over at me. I nod toward Zoe, and he gives a swift nod before I make my way over to them. Valerian and the girls were sitting in the back of the car with the heating going as the night turned terribly cold, cold like emptiness we all felt. I look at them, checking on them before leaning against the hood next to Zoe, when my father wanders out looking rather lost. I was about to go to him when Callan gripped my arm. "I'll go check on him," Callan says, and I nod, grateful. "Macy is still with Tatum. He has gone in for surgery to try to save his leg," Zoe whispers to me. "And Macy, she was bitten, wasn't she?" Zoe shakes her head. "She isn't infected. She called me before her blood tests came back clear. However, Tatum is riddled with venom, and they aren't sure if he will make it." "Dante," she nods toward him, where he is walking over to Lucian, who is still talking to the council investigators. "He is fine, beta blood. He is stronger than most, but so many are infected. Hopefully, Carter's blood really is the cure that's needed," Zoe says, and I swallowed. "Have you seen Ava?" I asked her. "I gave her your spare house keys," I nod. Ava had said she wanted to stay with us the night. Dad too, was staying at our place, not wanting to go home without Mum. We waited. Neither of us knew what to do, so I left it to Lucian and the Slasher Pack Alpha. They seemed to be in their element dealing with all the aftermath, and I didn't know the first thing about dealing with the Werewolf Council or what we do from here. When they are finished talking, and everyone eventually leaves, Lucian comes over with Dante. He rubs his hands up my arms. His touch was warm, making me realize how cold my skin was. "You should be in the car. It is too cold out here," he murmurs. "Where did our fathers go?" "Your father is staying with mine. Yours was apparently pretty drunk by the time Dad finished talking to him. I could go for a drink myself," Dante says, sounding exhausted as he nudged Lucian. Zoe shoots him a look, knowing I don't like Lucian drinking, and he had been drinking recently over the last few weeks, and I didn't want him to fall back into old habits. "Come on, I should get you home," Lucian says, pulling me closer to use himself as a shield to protect me from the wind. He moves to the back of Zoe's little car, where Valerian had fallen asleep with the girls. "Am I taking Taylor, or are you?" I asked Zoe. "Dante and I will take her," Zoe answers, and I nod, grabbing Valerian's blanket after Lucian grabs him. I kissed both the girls who were sleeping soundly before following Lucian to our car. He puts Valerian in the back, and I place his blanket over him while clipping him in. We drove home in devastating silence. I was glad it was dark because I knew the roads were still painted in blood, a storm was brewing above, and I was hoping most of it was washed away by morning. Yet, we still had plenty of clean-up to do, plenty of people still missing because it was dark before we found the vast majority of bodies. Lucian parked out in front of the hotel instead of underground. I stared at the front by the hedges where my mother's body was before Lucian gripped my hand, pulling my gaze away. Those were the most harrowing hours of my life, sitting on the rooftop watching, trying to keep the kids distracted from witnessing the H0RR0R scene below us. Trying not to scare them, and when it was all said and done, Lucian's desperation to check on us sent him to the roof. Not ideal, considering there wasn't a speck of skin that wasn't covered in blood. Luckily the kids were half asleep, so hopefully, they don't remember seeing him, though I knew Valerian did. He didn't stop trembling until after Lucian stepped out of the shower clean, and he realized it wasn't his father's blood, though he had remained silent ever since. It was impossible to convince the kids to keep their eyes closed while we left the roof, but Dante brought blankets up to check over their heads while we carried them to the first accessible floor so they wouldn't see the Forsaken my mother killed in the stairwell. Getting home, I unlocked the door, and Lucian immediately went to put Valerian in bed, though the sound of crying I could hear up the hall made me move to the guest bedroom. I nudged the door open to find Ava in bed, huddled under the blankets, Her body shook as she sobbed. Quietly, I moved toward the bed before climbing in behind her and wrapping my arms around her, hugging her as close as my belly would allow. I held her, and she cried, the sound breaking me into a million fractured pieces with sharp edges that pierced my soul. She's gone, Ava whispered. I nodded my head against her back and sniffled. I know, I whispered, not knowing what else to say. I couldn't take her pain, it was mine, too, though I wished I could stop her from feeling it. She cried herself to sleep, and I held her until then. Slipping out of bed, I moved toward my room. Pushing the door open, I find Valerian in our bed, Lucian wrapped around him. I slip my pajamas on, and Lucian lifts his head. He came in about 20 minutes ago, he whispers. I nodded my head before quickly slipping into bed on Valerian's other side. Lucian drapes his arm across both of us, his hand rubbing the side of my belly. I was worried you would fitting, Lucian murmurs, propping his head upon his hand to look at me. I shake my head and place my hand over his on my belly and lean forward, kissing Valerian's head. No, I wanted to, but it wasn't worth the risk, and I would have been no help anyway. I was where I needed to be and where Mum wanted me to be, and that was safe with Val, I tell him. Chapter 117. We had an entire week of funerals and memorials. Everything felt wrong, though. The city was quiet as we tried to settle back into life. Tatum was in an induced coma. They saved his leg, but infection spread everywhere, and Macy had been sick with worry, barely leaving his bedside. Zoe and I had been alternating with taking Taylor. Ava busied herself with work, and so did I, anything to take my mind off how quickly everything spiraled out of control. Coming home from work, I had been holed up in my office, which was finally finished, going over documents from both packs. The accounting from the hotel and scraping money left-right, the center to paying bills. Then I spent all afternoon helping Ava move her stuff back home from the apartment out the back of the hotel, which Macy would now take over. Walking inside, Lucian looked over the back of the couch, and the beer in his hand didn't escape my eyes as he quickly placed it down to turn to look at me. I put your dinner in the microwave, and Valerian asked for you at bedtime, Lucian says, and I nod while dumping my handbag on the hall stand. Why didn't you answer your phone? I have been calling all afternoon. And you shoved me out of the mind link, he said, his tone clipped at the end. I was with my father and Ava. I helped her move back in with Dad, I answered while moving to the kitchen. I heated up my dinner. I was exhausted, and even eating seemed like a major task. Lucian strolls into the kitchen, and I eye the bottle in his hand. He quickly tips it up and drains it, tossing it in the recycling. He catches me watching him when he turns around and arches an eyebrow. What? He demands. You know how I feel about you drinking. And I definitely don't want you drinking around Valerian, I tell him, and he scoffs. Right. Because I'm an alcoholic, he clicks his tongue and shakes his head, and I lean back on the counter and fold my arms across my chest. Don't put words in my mouth, Lucian, I never said that. I just said I don't like you drinking. But hey, if you say you are, you must be, I sighed. I so did not want to argue tonight. He growls but moves closer, his S going to my bump as he caresses it. I only had one. And Valerian is asleep. And I am not an alcoholic. Geez, Marin, I don't obliterate myself, he says before leaning closer. He dips his face closer, his lips brushing mine softly before biting my bottom lip playfully. I roll my eyes, pushing on his shoulders, and he chuckles, stepping back and opening the microwave when it dings. He grabs the plate out, sitting on the kitchen bench. Did you sort out the finances for the hotel and find out how much is owing to the contractors? He asked, and I nodded. And you paid it? He asked, and I growled before walking over to my handbag and grabbing his card out. I hand it to him, but he pushes my hand away. Keep it, he says, and I shake my head but place it back while he fetches me a fork. The real estate agent rang today. She said Alpha Daxon from Slasher Pack wants to repurchase the land from behind his pack. I tell him, and he nods. Yes, he wants to build some training grounds. He mentioned even wanting to train with our pack for a bit. Sounds like a plan. Also, I got a weird message from Carter today, I admit. Lucian points to the table, and I sit down while he brings my plate over, setting it in front of me. How did he get your number? Lucian asks, and I shrug. It wouldn't be hard, probably from his father's files. What did he want? Asked if we had settled the debt. Carter said he found the paperwork and bank statements. What did you say? I told him the truth, then offered him the titles for the back of his pack. But he said no, I shrug. Yet, his father wiped every cent from the pack's accounts. I say the pack will be dismantled if he doesn't do something soon. So, what should I do? I asked. I will talk to him tomorrow and handle it. And from what the investigators said, we owe Nixon nothing. As soon as he is found, he will be brought before the council and probably executed, anyway. Carter wasn't a part of that agreement, so has no warrant to claim it, and he was the one who infected your mother, so he can't claim money for the vaccine. Have they seen any sign of Nixon? I asked, M0ANING as I spear a piece of ravioli into my mouth. The sauce was heavenly. Lucian chuckles, leaning down and licking the sauce off my lips. I have something you can MN around that tastes better, he offers. Somehow, I think this tastes better, I teased, spearing another piece and popping it in my mouth. He laughs, pecking my lips before walking off into the bathroom. I hear the water turn on a few seconds later while I turn back to my food. Weeks later, 20-week ultrasound. Lucian sat nervously beside me, his foot tapping as Doc squirted the lubricant over my huge belly, the coldness of it making me want to pee. I glance at the clock above the door. Macy said she wanted to come. Maybe she got caught up at the hospital. Tatum was getting better with the infection gone and had woken up. But he couldn't shift without the risk of his leg not shifting, due to the nerves and tissue damage left behind from his leg being nearly completely removed. He had to go through physiotherapy to learn how to use his leg again because he could shift to heal himself, but they weren't sure if his leg would shift with the rest of him, so until he healed completely, it wasn't worth the risk. Doc starts the scan, taking measurements when we hear a knock. Doc leans over on his stool, opening the door, and Macy walks in, tiptoeing as if making noise would somehow disturb the doctor, and her knock didn't. She bends over and pecks my cheek before deliberately messing Lucian's hair, earning a growl from him as he swatted her hands away. She laughs and stares at the screen before squinting. So, you all placed your bets? Doc asked. He knew from previous scans that Macy and Lucian had a bet on the genders, hence why she was here. Yep. 2 boys and a girl, Lucian says. Nope. I say 3 girls, Macy says. Well, for your sake, I hope there's at least 1 boy. Valerian said last time you promised to wrestle in the boy way, and you will break that boy's heart. Doc laughs. He came to my last scan with Lucian. I will give Lucian one thing. He has never missed an appointment. He has had to remind me to attend a couple. Well, Mum, what do you think? Doc asks. 2 girls and boy, I tell him, crossing my fingers. He laughs and moves the device across my belly. I close my eyes when he declares baby A to be a girl. Next one is a boy, Lucian says before deflating when Doc says baby B is a girl. Macy rubs her hands together, then rubs the side of my belly. Nope. It's a girl, and you owe me 3 foot rubs, and you have to refer to me as oh favorite one for a full week. Macy says. Doc chuckles and shakes his head, moving the device over my belly. Stop with your karma voodoo. Lucian snaps at her, having already lost his bet. And what do you win? Doc asks since it was down to us. A jar of coffee, I say, and he turns his head to look at Lucian. She isn't human, Lucian. I told you to stop reading those baby books. She can drink as much coffee as she wants, Doc says, and I purse my lips. We don't know that for sure, Lucian argues. Do you have a doctor's degree? Macy asks. Just because you want to risk our kids coming out with 3 heads, he sneers at her. I would hope so. 2 heads only would be an issue since there are 3 of them, Macy taunts. You know what I mean, Lucian growls at her, and Doc laughs at their banter. He moved the device over my belly, and it took a while because Bob was playing hide behind the others, but he was finally able to get a good enough view before he declared. Baby C is, Lucian and Macy lean forward eagerly. A girl. Doc says, and Macy squeals and jumps in victory while Lucian deflates. Looks like you wrestled in a girl way, Alpha, Doc laughs. Apparently so, Lucian mutters. Oh. That is so much pink, he groans while Macy shook her in his face still doing her victory dance. Maybe we can dress one in blue and hope Valerian doesn't notice. Lucian says thoughtfully. He will notice, I deadpan, and Lucian sighs. I don't know what to do with girls, he pouts before glaring down at his crotch as if it wronged him. You had 1 job. And you gave me 3 girls. You couldn't have at least shot 1 boy out, he growled. I think he is just trying to hide his excitement for the 3 foot rubs he owes me, Macy says, and Lucian pulls a face. I am not touching those Neanderthal feet, he snaps. A deal is a deal, oh, and I will let my toenails grow just for you before I claim my first one, Macy states. Lucian pales and looks like he will puke. Tell you what? I will scrap 1 foot rub off if you give Marin her jar of coffee, wipe all 3, and I will, Lucian growls. She can drink coffee, and no, I will get rid of 1, Macy says, holding up 1 finger. He growls and scrunches his face up. Fine, and you better scrub those feet raw, and I am wearing gloves, he snarls when Doc leans down and whispers to me. Do they always fight like this? He asks. No, this is their love language, and Macy will win, just watch, I tell him. He laughs, turning back to finish the scan. Chapter 118. Lucian Marin had been put on bed rest. She had made it to 30 weeks pregnant, and Doc said at the moment, there was a chance she wouldn't carry the pregnancy to term. He also told us at her last appointment that she would need to have a C-section. But with everything going on, we hadn't even started setting up the nursery. Marin wanted to come, but she could barely walk a few meters without having to pee, and her feet were swollen. However, she didn't trust my vanilla taste, as she called it, so Valerian and I stopped by the hotel on the way to the baby store to pick up Macy and Zoe, who were coming to help pick out the baby stuff. She insisted he go to spend some time with me after we learned he had received detention, twice for hitting 2 boys at school and had been playing up. We spoke to him about it, and he said the boy deserved it. He refused to tell us what it was about, despite us trying to talk to him about it. Though I was glad they were coming because I knew Valerian would have a meltdown when he learned the genders. We didn't have the heart to tell him when we got home after the ultrasound. When we picked him up from school that day, he held balloons he painted blue. So today would be his revelation that he was getting 3 sisters instead of brothers. I nervously chewed my nail as I waited for Zoe and Macy to come out. Zoe was first out of the hotel, skipping excitedly over when I see Macy come out the side doors of the restaurant, and Zoe spots her. For a second, they stand there staring at each other. My brows furrow at why when they both start racing toward the car, shoving and pushing each other. Shotgun! Macy screams. I called it first. Zoe snarls, shoving her only to be ripped back as she reaches for the door handle. Macy sticks her tongue out at her when Zoe falls on her butt. She hops in the car, and I raise an eyebrow at her, and Zoe huffs and climbs in the back with Valerian. You two are idiots. I can't believe you just fought over the front seat like children, I tell them, shaking my head while they place their seat belts on. I shotgun the front on the way home. If you can get to it first, small fry, Macy taunts. Enough. Zoe gets the front on the way back. Stop your bickering, or both of you will sit in the back, I tell them. Geez, they were like Marin annoying little sisters. Gosh, I need to keep my daughters away from these 2 crazies, I thought to myself. Well, looks like I will be claiming that foot rub today, Macy says. Macy gets the front seat on the way back, I quickly declare. No way was I rubbing her feet. Ew. Dad won't rub your feet, Valerian says. Macy snickers. Your father has too. He lost a bet, Macy tells him. What sort of bet? Valerian asks, Zoe answers. Oh, you will see soon, Zoe says, messing his hair. Are you excited about going baby shopping? She asks him. Yep. I want to find the baby's dinosaur plus highs. And other plus highs, remember. And we are mainly going to find cots, I tell him. What girl? Macy starts to say. SHH. I hiss at her, not wanting Valerian to have a meltdown in the car. Hey. Valerian asks. Nothing. I was saying dinosaurs plus highs sound great. Taylor used to love dinosaurs, she still does, but only T-Rexes. She likes their little arms, Valerian says. When we reached the store, I couldn't believe how petrified I was of entering, knowing my son would find out the genders today. Alphas fear nothing, yet here I was scared to tell my own child I wrestled in a girl way because my PE*cur decided it was throwing girls this time around. Valerian wanders around the store finding stuff with Zoe and looking at cot blankets, while I found the cots Marin showed me on the store's website. They were white, and I checked to see if they had them in stock and they did, and for half price too. Once I had them set aside, I wandered around the aisles looking at baby clothes and blankets and picked up some pink stuff when Zoe and Valerian came over with some dinosaur plus highs. Can I pick a mobile? Valerian asks before his eyes go to the pink onesie in my hands. Macy wandered around the store with a trolley that had a blue blanket over it. One is a girl? Valerian asked, and I chewed my lip, about to put it back, when Zoe leaned down beside him. Girls aren't so bad. You like Taylor and Casey, Zoe tells him, and Valerian nods, looking at me. I found the bottle sterilizer she was looking at, and the pump. Oh, and I found the feeding pillow, Macy says, showing us. I got blue plus highs, Valerian says happily. Ah, that's great. They will love them, yeah, but now I need to find a pink one, Valerian says. Why? Girls like blue, Macy says, batting her lashes at him. She points to her eyes. See blue eyeshadow, she says. I guess you're right, Valerian says. We buy a few more things, and the rest we would order. He seemed to be taking the news of one girl all right, but I knew we had to tell him there wouldn't be a brother. He picked out some colorful mobiles for their cribs, and the girls wanted to see Marin, so we headed home afterward. The store was delivering the cribs tomorrow and the rest of the furniture. However, getting home, Valerian was questioning names. We had picked no names yet, though I had a couple in mind, and so did Marin. Yet deciding names, I found hard because the kid had to live with whatever we chose. The stress it was causing me was shocking. We showed Marin the few things we had with us, and Macy and Marin started pulling out the sterilizer and bottles, wanting to try them out. Valerian watched with eager eyes, drinking it all in. He talked of wanting to help with bottles, and Marin explained she was going to try feeding, but he could help when she expressed milk, which launched us into a conversation about how she had milk. And I think the boy will need counseling after that conversation. He seemed to think she was going to grow teats. So are you going to pick the girl's name and Dad pick the boy's names? He asks while testing the bottle brush viciously. Marin looks at me. You didn't tell him, she mouths. I smile at her awkwardly and hold my hands out apologetically. Well, you know how your father has to rub onto Macy's feet because she won the bet. Valerian shudders, then laughs. That is so gross, hey. My feet aren't gross, Macy tells him. I shudder at the thought. Yab. Dad wouldn't tell me what the bet was, though, Valerian pouts. Well, Auntie Macy bet that the babies would be 3 girls, Marin tells him, and his brows furrow. He looks at me, and I swear I felt the blood drain from my face. You said you would wrestle in boy way, he growls, stunning me. Astonished by the sound, I stare at Marin, who seems startled by it. Now they won't like my plus highs, he sobs, placing the bottle down and burying his face in his arms as he leans on the counter. Marin brushes her fingers through his hair and glares at me. Now we have to take them back, all because you wrestled in Mum's butt. Valerian cries, and Macy snorts and chokes at his words while Marin gaped at him and Zoe snickered. It's not funny. I told Dad to wrestle in a boy way. And he got it wrong, Valerian pouts. He snatches the plus highs off the counter, putting them back in the bag. Valerian, there is no way to wrestle in a boy or girl way, Marin tells him. Yet. Casey said she came out her mum's butt, but I came out your hoo-ha. And Dad promised. Marin corrects and laughs, and Zoe's face heats. Babies don't come out of the butt, but Casey said. Casey came out Valerian. Not my butt, and Taylor came out of my belly. They cut me open, but she is still a girl, Macy tells him, and he seems confused. Girls aren't so bad, Zoe tells him. I know, but now I will have to fight all the boys to protect them, he says, glaring at the plus highs in his hands. Hey! Marin says. As I do for Taylor and Casey. The boys pick on them. I had to punch Blake in the nose the other day. He tugged on Casey's hair and made her cry and called Taylor a rogue, he says. So that is why you got detention at school the other day? I asked him. He called Taylor that? Macy asked, and Valerian nodded his head. Did you tell the teacher? Zoe asked, yet Macy's eyes watered, knowing the title bestowed on her was now on her daughter. I despised that name. It sickened me, and to know children of my own pack were referring to other children by it angered me. No. I punched him on his big nose. You shouldn't have hit him, but told me. I will speak with Blake's father. Violence isn't the answer, I tell him. I don't want them to call my sisters names, he says. They won't. Besides, they will be tough like your mama. And they will have you to protect them, Zoe tells him. Valerian nods. So, do I still have to apologize to Blake? Valerian asks. In my eyes, no, but the principal asked for an apology when he returned from his 2-day suspension. You still need to apologize for hitting him, but I will be making sure Blake also has to apologize, I tell him looking at Macy. She folds her arms across her chest and nods once, clearly not happy that her daughter is being picked on. I'll handle it, I tell her, and she nods. Yet the look on her face was like she wanted to go deliver the boy his mother never gave him. The girls stayed for coffee and cake that Zoe made me stop for at the bakery on the way home, and I drove them back to the hotel so they could get the girls from the school in an hour. Around 3:30, Marin's phone rang as she reached for it on the coffee table where Valerian was drawing. It's on to Macy, Valerian says, passing the phone to her. She quickly answers it when I felt the mind link open up. Dante's voice frantically echoed in my head. Have you seen Ava and Zoe? He asks. Not since I dropped Zoe back at the hotel. What's up? Ava and Zoe went to pick up a few things from the hardware and were supposed to pick Casey and Taylor up. Yet the school rang me, and I am on my way there now to get them. Where's Macy? With Tatum. He had a physio this afternoon. She is meeting me at the school, Dante says. Have you tried mind-linking her? Of course. But the bond is blocked. I can't feel her, Lucian, he says frantically, and I could hear the fear in his voice. What? Where are you? I asked, confused. Marin stands up and is talking frantically, and she moves to the house phone. Yeah, I am trying her mobile now, I hear her say as she dials a number into the house phone. Driving to get Casey, I feel off, and I can't feel her. Why is she blocking me out? Hang on, Marin is ringing someone, I'm trying Ava's phone, she says. I listen to it ring out. I'll try my father, I hear her say as she starts dialing more numbers with shaking hands. I make my way over to her when Dante suddenly screams through the mind link before it cuts off. My heart raced at the agony in his voice, and I instantly tried to reopen it, but I got nothing but howling through the link and knew he had shifted. Chapter 119. Zoe, did you grab the paint thinners? I asked Ava as we lined up at the hardware store. She rummaged through her basket, holding up the tin, and I nodded. We were revamping some of the outdoor furniture and had stopped on our way to do the school run to grab a few things before picking up the kids. You think it will get it off? Ava asked, reading the instructions on the back of the tin. Yeah, it'll work. Just don't get it on your skin, it burns, I tell her while we go through the self-serve. I take the tins from her and quickly scan them. We pay for our items before walking back out to my little car. We were loading everything into the trunk when I heard the screech of tires on the road. We both look over our shoulders to see a red van speed past at alarming speeds. Both of us watched the commotion on the main street before the car left our sight. It's a school time, Ava says, shaking her head. I sighed, quickly closing the trunk before climbing into the driver's side. I had just started the car and Ava was climbing into the passenger seat when my phone rang. It was Dante checking if I was still right to grab the kids. I told him we were on our way to the school before quickly hanging up, and he promised to meet me at home. We clip our seat belts in and pull onto the road. We were driving past the reserve toward Lucian's Pack where the school is when the roar of an engine was heard coming up fast behind us. Ava looks behind us and GR0ANS. It's the DD from the hardware store, she says, turning back to the front. Must be the day for drivers. Going around the slight bend, I am jolted forward in my seat. My head hits the steering wheel and I vaguely remember hearing Ava scream and the sound of creaking metal when everything went black. My head pounded when my vision returned, and pain slithered up my spine. The smell of oil and rubber reached my nose as I dazedly blinked to find I was upside down, my eyes blurred throbbed to the same beat as my head, smoke and dust filling the inside of the car from the smashed windows. The scent of blood wafted to my nose and my hands hung above my head as I realized we had crashed. I tried to remember what happened, but I groaned, dazed and pained. Looking over at Ava, she also groaned before tugging at her belt. I tried to warn her and reached for her, but it was too late as she undid her seatbelt and crashed onto the roof of my upturned vehicle. I tried to put my hand on the roof to support my weight when shooting pain washed through my hand. I shrieked, looking at it to find my thumb dislocated when Ava unclips my seatbelt and I land on my busted hand. "Zoe, what happened?" Ava murmurs, clutching her head and my surroundings spun as I rolled onto my back. I glance out the window to find we were in the reserve. How long had we been out for? "The truck," I groaned, rolling back only to see feet racing toward us through the broken window. A gasp escapes me and my eyes widen when I see a man reach in through the broken window and grip Ava's hair, just before she turned to see what I was looking at. He started yanking her through the smashed, mangled window. Ava screams and thrashes and I grip her legs, trying to hold her when she is yanked from my grip. Her screams rang out loudly when a man I had never seen before punched her and knocked her out. Her body goes limp and I crawl out the window of my wrecked vehicle and try to stop him, only to forget about the other two set of feet I saw. Arms wrap around my torso as I scream for them to let her go. Her body was floppy over the man's shoulder. Twisting, I try to turn in the man's grip, trying to get loose before I sank my teeth into his bicep. He growls and lets go, allowing me to escape his clutches. The man with Ava walks up the steep incline, and I chased after the man who grabbed her. Before I could reach her, I was tackled, and the air expelled from my lungs with an oomph. I wheeze, trying to catch my breath when I feel the mind link open up. "What do you want to do with this one?" A deep baritone voice calls out above me as I thrash trying to get out from under him, his knee pressed in the center of my back crushing my lungs. "Bring her. Boss may let us keep her," I heard another voice call out and the man above rolled me over, his hand wrapped around my throat, and he smiled cruelly. His dark hair falling in eyes when I heard Dante's voice flit through the mind link. "Babe!" Dante screams through the link. "Dante!" I shrieked. "Oh, we'll have fun with you all right," the man growls, flashing his teeth as I try to free myself. I scream when I feel his tongue roll across the side of my face and he groans lewdly. His friend behind him is laughing and I try to alert Dante when a fist connects with the side of my head. I gazed dizzily up at the sky, my eyes losing focus when I am hit again and see nothing but darkness. Ava motion and bumps woke me. We were in the back of a van, and my hands were tied behind my back. My fingers felt like they were losing circulation when I hit the side wall before hearing a chuckle. A whimper escapes me as I lay on my trapped arms and I look up only to be kicked in the stomach by the man sitting along the side wall. His legs were what I had slid into. I grunt at the impact and am winded instantly when the van stops, causing me to roll onto the other side. The double back doors are swung open. IS number CK in a harsh breath as pain rattled through all of me and I could taste my own blood and smell. Turning my head, I searched for her to find Zoe also tied up and another man with ash blonde hair was pawing at her. Her chest was littered with bite marks, her shirt had been torn off her. Zoe was unconscious and completely limp. Fear coils and slivers through me. No! I gasped. I growl at him and struggle against my restraints. Don't touch her, you sick! I scream at him when I see the man push his hand down. At the same time feel a pinch in my neck, and the dark-haired man waves a syringe in front of my face. That'll do. Now quiet or you will get a taste of what she gets, the man who kicked me says. He sweeps his dark hair from his eyes before he gripped my arm, dragging me from the back of the van. I felt funny. My vision tunneled yet I remained conscious, although I felt the wolf's bane burning through my system, stunning my wolf and muting the mind link. I cursed myself, I should have played dead and alerted my father. Yet I was helpless as I felt the drug take effect and I was tossed onto the cold concrete floor. My head bouncing off it painfully when Zoe falls beside me. Zoe. IGR0ANED. She was drenched in blood, and I knew I was too, but she had a deep gash across her forehead and blood dribbled out the corner of her mouth. Zoe. I cried when I saw the man who stabbed me in the neck also stab a needle into hers. She doesn't respond. When I hear the sound of footsteps, my eyes try to glance around. My body was paralyzed, and it wasn't until the footsteps drew close enough that I could see his face. Carter. A growl vibrates and dies in my chest. He wore a dark blue suit. Carter looked like his father, only more unhinged. His eyes are half red and half green like snake eyes, the aftermath of being a Forsaken. His scent was also off, not rogue but also not smelling like a pack wolf either. His hair was styled messily like he had run his fingers through his gelled hair. Tattoos poked out from under his open buttons on his white dress shirt and on his arms where his sleeves were rolled to the elbows. Who is that? Carter asks, motioning toward Zoe with his hand. Someone she was with. I think Ava called her, Zoe, the dark-hair man says while looking over at his buddy, who shrugs. Ah. Just a rogue, the blonde man says. She isn't. She is Beta Dante mate, I tried to rasp out as my tongue thickens, swelling in my mouth. My words are not even audible with the way they slurred. My heart raced in my chest when I saw him bend down and grip her face, turning it to look at her. She is marked, Carter sneers. I watch as Carter stands up and nudges her onto her back with his foot and he sighs, looking at his men before his eyes roam over her half-undressed body. Do what you want with that one. No one touches John's daughter though, I need her alive for now, Carter says and the two men chuckle darkly. The blonde man licks his lips as he bends down to grab her. My heart sank into my stomach, a pit forming as I watched her get tossed over his shoulder before I am also grabbed. We appeared to be in some sort of warehouse, but as they moved toward a door, we were suddenly descending stairs. I tried to take everything in, looking for an escape and trying to remember my way through the tunnels as they navigated the twists and turns. We seemed to be in the old emergency evacuation tunnels that ran beneath the city. They were all supposed to have been closed up years ago, but it was obvious Nixon's pack had been opening them, because after about 10 minutes of walking I was deposited onto the cold floor in a part that opened up wider, creating a large space. Zoe is dumped beside me, and she grunts as she comes to when hitting the hard ground. She blinks rapidly as she wheezed while trying to catch her breath. Her eyes fell on me and tears burned my eyes, and she opened her mouth, but like me, she couldn't get her tongue to work. Yet it didn't stop her blood-curdling scream when one of the men started ripping her pants off. I wanted to help her, yet was powerless to do anything but watch as she screamed. I sobbed when Carter wandered into the room, his shoes loud on the concrete as he made his way over. He saunters over to me and crouches beside me. Carter peers over his shoulder, as his men fight over who would get her first. He smirks and taps my face in his hand. "Don't worry, Ava. I will make sure you get to watch," he purrs, sweeping my hair away from my eyes. "Should have taken me up on the marriage proposal. Oh well," he clucks his tongue. "Your sister and father made an enemy of the wrong person." "But," he pauses when Zoe screams and Carter laughs as I watch one of the men run a blade and cut her cloth away. Yet all she could do was lay there and watch what they did to her. A whimper escapes me. "Now, if Lucian and your father don't meet my demands, that will be you next," he says before rising. Zoe cried and screamed before she just stared off vacantly, like she suddenly became an empty shell. Her eyes staring at the ceiling and her screams died out when the dark-haired man pushed her. I screamed and cried, clenching my eyes shut, unable to watch her. Praying someone would get to us before they killed her. Yet as the hours dragged on, I lost track of time. And on regular intervals I was jabbed, just like Zoe, with a needle. I had no idea how long had passed and I had dozed off when I heard footsteps of the two men and Carter returning, along with another man. Carter nods toward his men who then dragged a screaming Zoe from the room, down the tunnel and around the corner into the next room. Her screams rang out loudly, and I threw up, choking on my vomit as it suffocated me. I prayed they would kill me. I couldn't handle her screams, handle her cries and what I saw. I wanted to tear my eyes from my head to unsee the horrid things they did to her. The horrid things I was forced to watch and the vile things she endured. Only death didn't come, because Carter swiftly walked over, turning my head enough that I did not aspirate on my own vomit. "There, that's better. Can you see? Don't want you to miss the show," he taunted, wiping my wet eyes before he grabs my hair. He drags me through my own vomit and to where I had a better view of the new man raping my friend. Anger burned through me and I roared, my anger forcing words out. "I hope he rips you to shreds," I screamed, and Carter laughed. He dropped me on the floor, the back of my head smashing the pavement when I saw his foot come toward my face and everything went black. Time was lost to me when I came to, though this time I had feeling in my limbs, yet my mind felt stunted. Warmth bled into my back and her body shook, which made me turn my head to find Zoe huddled beside me, her knees clutched to her chest, yet the dead look in her gaze was off-putting. Sluggishly, I pull myself up to a sitting position and lean against the wall she was leaning against. I press closer to her, trying to warm her. She looked like she had bathed in blood. "Zoe," I murmur, but she just stared vacantly ahead and I turn my head to find Carter on the phone. "Well, I will hand the little one back, send the rogue to get her. But Ava stays until you stand down and hand the city back over Lucian, and don't forget my money," he snarls into the phone before hanging it up. "What's going on?" one of the men asked glancing over at us. "Grab her, her friend is going to do the exchange at the bridge, and if she doesn't bring the money with her, then we toss her over, but Marin won't risk her sister." "You watch Ava," he says to the ash-blonde one. "She is coming with us." "What about Lucian?" the dark-haired man says. "Not an issue, he knows he follows the woman I kill Ava, he wants her back." He stands down as alpha and relinquishes his pack to me, Carter says and I gasp. "And John?" the man asks. "He wants to swap places with his daughter. We'll let him sweat it for a bit, maybe send him some pictures. But I think our only chance is to keep her. John would die for his girls and Lucian knows that. We aren't doing the swap. Besides, I want John to live with knowing he is the reason his family is dead, well, obviously. But what next? Once Lucian stands down, the city is ours, then I will get revenge on Alpha John when I kill his daughters and grandson, Carter says, confusing me. And her, he motions toward me. We kill her, but first we'll play with her first, he cackles loudly while walking out. The dark-haired man moves toward us and reaches for Zoe, who spits on him. He backhands and I launch forward only to be kicked in the face by the other man and she is dragged out kicking and screaming by her hair. Chapter 120. Lucian. We found Dante when we located the car. He was furious and I couldn't get a coherent thought out of him. Whatever he felt through the bond made him want blood. He was more crazed than any Forsaken I had come across. It took 12 of my men and myself to take him down. We had to sedate him, which only caused fear to twist in my stomach. We found Zoe's car down a ravine by the reserve. It was on its roof but no sign of the girls, yet tire tracks in the mud told us they were run off the road. We had the entire city out looking for them. None of us could locate them via the mind link. Slasher Pack was also out searching. John was beside himself and Marin was a frantic mess. In a matter of minutes our worlds were turned upside down and Marin was convinced Nixon had come back and took them. I had men out looking for Carter and he was located quickly. He gave us the all-clear to search his pack. 2 days they were missing for, it made no sense, until the first ransom call came in. A growl tore out of me when I heard Marin answer the call and Carter's voice was heard on the other end. Now that I have your attention and you have been unable to locate them, you will meet my demands, Carter states. Marin stared at the phone checking the number and it was definitely Carter's name. She puts him on loudspeaker and my brows furrow. The bastard even helped us search his pack territory. Was this some sick game to him? Carter? I asked. Hello Lucian, Carter drawls through the phone. Done wasting resources? Though I am shocked at how hard you searched for Zoe, is it? I growl at him opening the mind link. You sick, Dante will kill you when he gets his hands on you, I never touched her, he claims. Find Carter. He has them, I call through the link. Well, that was fast, he says, confusing me. Excuse me? 2 seconds and I hadn't even asked for anything yet and you called across the mind link. You won't find me, he says and I look at Marin. He laughs, I knew he was crazy but this was a whole other level. I have a mole. Don't be surprised, you have plenty of enemies in this city. It shouldn't come as a surprise to know one lives in your pack, that renders the mind link useless. Where is Ava Zoe? I demand. With me, of course. Now call off your men or, I send Zoe back in pieces, Marin whimpers beside me and I glance at her, the blood draining from her face. Macy bursts into the living room, she had been staying here while we organized search parties. She rushes to Marin's side and helps her sit down. What do you want? I swear, if you have hurt them, though I knew he already had, by the fact my beta has had to be sedated for 2 days. You'll do nothing Lucian. I am calling the shots. Now I have 2 requests. 1. I want the money John owes. 2. You stand down as Alpha, hand your pack over to me, and leave the city. Leaving your mate and son behind until I know you are far enough away for me to escape. I will. Hand them over and we can talk this out, I tell him. You're not in a position to compromise. As I said, I'm calling the shots not you but as a sign of goodwill, I want the money by 5 p.m. I will select the meeting spot, and send Marin to drop the money off, no. I snarled, cutting him off. I don't think you understand the position you're in Lucian, I'll do it, Macy says. I glance at her and Marin shakes her head trying to get out of her seat, but I growl telling her to sit down. See, you have a volunteer. May I know who the brave lady is? Carter asks and Macy growls. Oh, and she sounds feisty, Carter chuckles. Oh, you have no idea how sadistic, but nonetheless, money at 5 p.m. I will call with the drop-off point and tell her where to go, in return I will give her Zoe. Once you see I made good on this, then we move on to the next part. You want me out of the city? That is fine, but I am taking my mate and son with me. That isn't what I agreed to, but for now I need the money. If anyone follows her, I will get one of my men to slit Ava's throat. Marin gasps at his words, making my eyes dart to her briefly. Why are you doing this? I don't know. Why am I doing this? He laughs. Do as he says, Lucian, please, Marin begs with tears in her eyes, though her rage was evident through the bond. Take the deal. I will meet him, Macy growls. So the girl, what is her name? Her name is Macy, the rogue. I heard about her, quite the brute, Macy growls, snatching the phone from me. Macy gives Carter her number, and Marin starts calling banks to empty accounts to come up with the money. It just made no sense. And who was the mole in my pack? There was only one way for him to know I used the mind link, which means one of my men was with him. One person follows her, and I kill Ava, Carter snarls as Macy hands the phone back to me. Yet. I heard you. I was about to hang up when he spoke again. Well, I will hand the little one back. Send the rogue to get her, but Ava stays until you stand down and hand the city back over, Lucian, and don't forget my money, he snarls into the phone before hanging it up. He had them all this time, Marin says, her hands shaking as she rubs her face with them, wiping the tears away. I have to tell my father, she murmurs, getting to her feet and passing me the phone that she was on the bank with. I send Officer Derek to retrieve the cash and bring it here, while I have Doc sent over to give Macy a dose of the cure in case Carter tries anything. We then waited by the phone for it to ring. John came over with my father, and the moment the phone rang he pounced on it and begged to swap places with Ava. My father had said John had called Carter on Way here, but Carter refused. This whole scenario was bizarre and I couldn't figure it out, none of us could. We thought Carter was a victim in this. That is how he portrayed himself to be when his father fled. We found him in a padded room for sake. Was it all an act? Put the girl on, Carter snarls, obviously getting sick of John's begging. He hands the phone to Macy. Get in your car. I will tell you the directions. One person follows and Ava is dead, so don't try anything, he snarls and Macy swallows and looks at us. Taylor comes out from up the hall. Tears brimming in her eyes. My father instantly tends to her, escorting her off. Do as I say and no one gets hurt, Carter says, and she lets out a shaky breath. Marin goes to lift the duffel bag, but I take it from her and place it over Macy's shoulder. Officer Derek stops her as she passes him and holds a finger to his lips. He pulls his gun from his holster and turns the safety off and on to show her, and she nods before he tucks it down the back of her pants. Macy was also wearing a tracking device and voice recorder tucked in her bra. The council was already alerted. There was no way he was leaving this city once I stood down. But what was the point of that if he was planning on leaving? All it would do is sever my ability to mind link, and I know my people won't bow for any other alpha. Except whoever the traitor in my pack is. It made no sense. I watched helplessly as she left out the doors, knowing he was watching from somewhere outside, and it wasn't worth the risk knowing Ava would be killed. For now, I would play his game until the council arrived. Then I would kill him. Macy, my stomach knotted and the gun dug into my lower back as I followed his directions. Yet he had me circling the city for ages like he was wasting my time. Turn at the next roundabout and double back, this was the 6th loop of the city. I knew he was making sure I wasn't followed. Lucian wouldn't risk Ava and Zoe. I knew that much, but he was an idiot if he thought Lucian wouldn't come after him for this. Dante would kill whoever hurt Zoe when he woke. The rogues would even hunt the bastard down for what he did. Pull over by the post office sorting facility, I do as he says, yet I see no one or any cars. Get out of the car and walk up the alley and place the bag by the bin. Where is Zoe? I growl. Dump the bag first, not until I have Zoe. I snarl. Little stupid making demands, don't you think? Very well, Zoe is with me, and where are you? Close. Now dump the bag. No. Not until I have Zoe. Carter snarls. Foolish woman, he sneers and Zoe shrieks in the background. Okay. Okay. I yell, shoving the door open. This part of town was dead, but close to the old meat factory, and I had a sneaky suspicion he was in one of these warehouses. I grab the bag from off the back seat, glancing around. There is a dumpster and one of my men is up there. Once you hand the bag over, I will tell you where to find your friend, I growl, but do as he says. A man with dark hair smiled and waved as I drew closer. That's close enough, drop the bag, he calls, and I do. Do as he says, Carter adds. I hear a car pull up behind me and my heart rate picks up. Back up slowly, the man says, leveling his gun at me, and I raise my hands in the air, backing up like he asked. The phone clutched in my hand and I was aware a car had pulled up down by mine at the end of the alley. The man backs away, before rushing off. I hear a car door open and hear a grunt behind me and whimper. You can turn around, tell Lucian this is a warning, if he doesn't heed the warning what happens next is on him. Carter says, and I turn around. I notice Zoe first, wearing only a man's shirt and covered in blood. I scream, dropping the phone, and rush toward her when his scent hits me and I see a man shove her forward to her knees. I stopped in my tracks as I peered at the man who no doubt was Carter. He appears just as shocked and I stagger, my heart near stopping. No. No. Not him, anyone but him. Yet my entire body screamed, mate. Macy. Zoe screams, pulling us both out of our stunned standoff. He shakes his head, racing back toward his car while I raced toward Zoe. She screams, the sound tearing my soul apart, and I graze my knees as I fall to them to clutch her. Her entire body shook as I clutched her. He still has Ava, she cried. You have to help her, yet the scent of the man from the alleyway was all over her, and another man's, though not Carter's. Yet he let them do this to her. I didn't have to ask, it was obvious when I picked up another scent. I was about to say the name when she did. Mitcha is helping Carter, she choked out and sobbed. Mitcha did this? I asked, and Zoe whimpered. Wait, does Derek know his son is in on this? Where is Dante? I want Dante. She whimpers as I haul her to her feet. I will take you to him, come, we need to get you to hospital. Yet my stomach turned. How could I be mates to a monster? A monster that hurt Zoe, hurt my sister. My blood boiled in my veins, yet I contained it. He deserved what was coming for him. My Casey? OMG Macy, where is Casey? Zoe was unbelievable. After whatever she endured, all she cared about was her mate and daughter. Her hands clutched me tightly and I opened the passenger side of my car and helped her in. She is with Marin, she is safe. But for now, I need to get you out here and alert Lucian about Officer Derek's son, I snarl the last word. Chapter 121. Marin Macy rang me as soon as she got Zoe and I demanded Lucian take me to the hospital to meet them. Macy also said to bring Officer Derek along with us, so we left the kids with Callan and my father while we went off to meet them. My anxiety was through the roof as we waited. We were sitting in the room with Dante, who was slowly coming out of sedation. Lucian was trying to calm him down, because as soon as his eyes opened he was trying to climb out of bed. My phone started ringing and I pulled it from my pocket and answered it to find it was Macy. I'm in a room a few doors down from Dante. Hold off on letting Dante see her for a second. And come here. He shouldn't see her like this, she tells me, and I glance at Lucian, who was trying to hold Dante in place. Officer Derek whips out his handcuffs the moment Lucian tells him and cuffs him to the bed. Macy has asked me to go see Zoe. Are you right with him for a second? I mind-linked Lucian and he nodded, looking at Officer Derek, who nodded. Officer Derek follows me a few doors down, and I take a breath before opening the door and stepping in. What I wasn't expecting was the scene in front of me. Zoe was frantically fighting Macy, who was trying to restrain her and calm her down. Nurses stood around her and a doctor with a syringe like he was about to try sedate her. I growl at him and he drops the needle, stepping away from her, and Zoe's eyes snap to me and so does Macy's. Though the snarl that left her when Officer Derek walked in behind me was thunderous. And the next second, she had pulled his gun on him. Macy! I hissed in shock, rushing to Zoe, who clutched my arms. Yet she refused to lower the gun, but I was more focused on Zoe, who refused to let go of me. Begging and pleading to be able to see Dante and Casey. SHH. Breathe, Zoe. Deep breaths. Dante is fine. You can see him in a minute, I whisper as tears burn my eyes at seeing her so frantic. She reeked of wolves' scents, when I picked up a familiar scent. One that had my head turning toward Officer Derek. Out! Macy snarls at him, pointing the gun at him. He held his up and did as she asked, stepping out of the room while she followed after him. Lucian, get to Derek before Macy shoots him. She is in the hall, I mind-linked, turning my attention back to Zoe. I just want my baby. I want my Casey. Zoe sobbed, her nails digging into my arms, and my eyes ran over her. She was a mess. Covered in blood, and I swallowed, the pain in her voice, the desperation. I don't even think she registered Macy had left, her mind only had one focus, and that was to get to her family. Okay. But you don't want to scare Casey, do you? I ask her and she appears to be confused. I grip her hands, prying them off my arms where she drew blood with her nails. You don't want to scare Casey, Zoe, I tell her, holding her hands up in front of her face. She blinked at me before noticing the blood on her hands. I promise I will take you to them. But you need to let the nurses check you over, and, I swallowed, looking at them. They need to take some swabs, so we can get those that hurt you. So they don't hurt anyone else, I tell her, and she blinks, staring at her hands that tremble violently. I don't want to scare Casey, she murmurs. That's right, we don't want to scare Casey. I am right here, okay. But I need you to lay down so we can make sure you're okay. I felt stupid saying that. I knew she wasn't okay. I'm right here, I tell her, nudging her toward the bed before turning to the doctor. Get a female doctor. You're not touching her, I tell him, and he rushes out. Casey mutters to herself as she lays down, and I could see she was in shock. And she appeared to remain in that state while doctors and nurses cleaned her up, and ran their tests when she lurched upright. Ava, she gasped with wide eyes. They still have a vat. You have to help her, Tears pricked my eyes at her words, some escaping and slipping down my face. I know. But for now, my focus is on you, I tell her. Doc came in and I was about to tell him to get out because we had the female doctor here, and that he wasn't really needed, but Zoe sat up. Dante, she asked, her voice pleading. He is down the hall. I can take you to him. But first, I have some officers that want to take a statement from you, Doc tells her. He smiles at me sadly. No. I want my mate, she says, shaking her head. Can you do this one thing first? Just this one thing and then he will take you to Dante, I tell her when I hear a howling wail from outside. Zoe, understandably in shock, didn't seem to notice it as she laid back down, when a female officer came in. I bite my lip wondering what is going on out in the hall when Macy comes in. I glance at her and she walks over to me. Mitcha was one of them, she whispers to me and my stomach drops. He would do that to his daughter's mother. My blood boiled, but it explained his scent and Derek's reaction from in the hall. Zoe gave her statement and I nodded for Doc to get Dante. We helped her out of bed, she wore a hospital gown and was mostly cleaned up. The nurses helped us shower her to rid her of their scents that lingered on her. She was jumpy, but she also knew we were trying to help her. Zoe knew Macy and I would never hurt her. Yet the moment Dante stepped in the room, something snapped within her as she tore out of our grip. Her body crashed against his, sending him backward as he clutched her. Lucian walks in behind him and steps around them. The nurses quickly leave while we watch all the broken parts of both of them shatter more as Dante comes to the realization of what happened to her. No one told him, but he knew, that much was obvious when he sniffed her and his eyes went to Lucian. The murderous look on his face was evident. He wanted blood. And Lucian nodded to him in a silent message telling him he would get it. You're okay, Dante whispered to her, tears slipping down his face as he rocked her. We are gonna be okay, he whispers repeatedly to her, using his mate bond to soothe her as she sobbed against him. Derek. I mind link Lucian. Hunting his son, he had no idea. I asked. No. I commanded him, he had no idea. Apparently Amber left Mitcha. And she took another as a mate. He has hardly seen his son since. Said he hadn't been of sound mind, I nod, clenching my teeth. He would pay for what he has done, and so would Carter for allowing it. We knew he didn't touch her because his scent wasn't on her, but there were two more. I just prayed Ava wouldn't be subjected to the same thing. I need to go. Can you watch Zoe? I'll be back soon, Macy whispers to me. My brows furrow, but I nod to her. She probably wanted to get changed out of her blood-soaked clothes. Are you heading home? I ask and she nods. I just want to change and I need to check on Tatum. He has been blowing up my phone, I nod to her. Macy leaves, but I couldn't help but feel something was up with her too. Or maybe it was the shock of everything. She leans down and touches Zoe's hair where she was sitting on the floor with Dante. Zoe looks up at her. I'll be back soon, okay, Macy tells her. Casey? Zoe asked. I will check on her, okay? You will see her soon, Macy tells her and she nods. Macy leaves when Doc comes in with a pill cup in his hands and a bottle of water. He silently stood there reading the room, his eyes falling on Dante as he watched for any reaction. But Marux was deadly calm as Doc explained what the pills were. Morning after pills. Zoe stares at the little cup before she breaks down, putting her head in her hands. I will leave these over here for her if she wants them, Doc says, placing them on the little table and walking out. Dante talks to her and I hated this. My own thoughts of when I found out I was pregnant and my father demanding I get an. How silly it seemed that Zoe was worried she would be going against the goddess, but no goddess would condone this. Condone someone's will being taken from them. Yet seeing her struggle put it into perspective. Our situations were so different. If you want to take them, Zoe, no one is judging, Lucian tells her. But the goddess, Zoe whimpered. The goddess would understand. The goddess would give you the right to choose. And no choice is wrong. Everyone's situation is different and no one is judging. This isn't a judgment. You won't be judged for doing what you want to do, I tell her. Zoe seems unsure, yet I could tell she didn't want to potentially carry her SD's child. Choice. There is a reason the goddess grants it. The only one getting condemnation is those taking another's choice. Your body, your life. No one gets to tell you what you do with it. And no one has a right to judge your choice. They aren't the ones that have to live with it, I tell her, and Zoe nods. I don't want to, I can't carry, she shakes her head. No child should be forced into a world this way. My judgment and beliefs suddenly shifted. This is one of many circumstances where one should have the right to choose. This is not the work of any goddess, nor would any goddess punish someone for aborting a few cells. Now I understand why she gave us a choice. Why we got to choose. Because if all our stories were the same, why would our opinions on it be so different? If she wanted us all the same, why would situations be so different? Why are our fates different? No one chooses this for themselves. Just like no one chooses poverty. So those that can't bring a child into the world due to life circumstances like poverty aren't heartless, they are selfless. Sacrificing their own wants to stop any future child from having to live the torments or consequences of how they were brought into the world. Choice and options. There is a reason we are given it, because not all choices are made the same. And no one's choices should be judged when it comes to another's life or a life being brought into the world. Especially life that would only know pain or judgment. I hold the pills out for her and she looks at Dante, who lets her decide. He adds no input. The decision is her and hers alone. She chooses to let the suffering end, and it's the same decision I would have made. Though there is no right or wrong decision because it is not my life and not my place to judge. Dante hugs her tight as she hands the little cup back to me empty. I set it down and she lets out a breath. Dante rests his head against the wall and Zoe looks at Lucian. Mitcha is helping Carter, she whispers, and Dante growls. Lucian crouches down next to her. I know. We will get him, he promises her, and she nods, wiping a stray tear before she looks at me just as Doc walks in. He nods his head, tossing the small cup in the bin. Can you tell us anything about where you were kept? Lucian asks her. She sniffles but answers. The old tunnels under the city. He was talking about getting vengeance for, she looks at me. He wants revenge on your father. I overheard him. He wants Lucian to stand down as alpha, she shakes her head like she is trying to remember something. He needs Lucian to leave the city, so he can get, her eyes widened and she looked at me. To kill you and Valerian. To get revenge on your father, he. I can't remember, she rubs her temples and Lucian growls. The council will be here by tomorrow, but I bet Carter has moved. He wouldn't have stayed there after handing Zoe back, Lucian says, looking at me. Yet I was still stuck on what this had to do with my father. My father? That's who said he wants to get revenge on. Zoe nods. So not Lucian and me? But my father? I asked. Hadn't Carter's father caused my family enough? Might have something to do with Rachel. Doc says, and I turn to look at him, and so does Lucian. Why does that name ring a bell for me? Lucian mutters. Nixon's first wife. The one Carter's mother killed. Rachel was close with your mother, Doc says with a shrug. But what's that got to do with my father? She turned forsaken, I told him. No idea. But there was a lot of speculation around that time. What do you mean? I knew Leah, I was her doctor when she was pregnant with her twins. I was sworn to keep quiet. So many conspiracies around that time. Everything was swept under the rug, but even I heard about the rumors when Leah disappeared. No. She left, Lucian says. Doc looks over at me. That's what everyone thinks, but rumors still went around that your father banished Leah from the city. Though I can't be sure, they were just rumors, Doc tells me. Wait. Why would my father banish her? I asked. Because she was Nixon's mate, and Leah was from the Shadow Pack. She was one of your father's pack members. Doc answers. They are just rumors, of course. I suppose the only people that really know what happened are Nixon and Leah, he shrugs. But Nixon admitted to abandoning her and forcing her forsaken, I tell him, confused. Doc shrugs. Doesn't mean it is the truth, Doc says. I knew Leah and there was no way she would have left Carter. And Nixon loved her, though he was forced to marry Rachel for the Pack Alliance. Pack Alliance? I'm not sure, but maybe you should ask your fathers, that was their time of ruling, they may have more information than I can provide. Or maybe check the council records. There has to be some record of what happened. It's no secret that the Alphas have a way of covering their tracks, yet that doesn't stop the rumors, Doc tells us. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audio book will be continued in next episode.